At the bottom center of the Real ADT plugin is the LFO section. If you don't want to have to manually manipulate the virtual tape speed, like they did back in the day, you can have an LFO modulate the delay automatically. Just a reminder, an LFO is a low-frequency oscillator, just like the ones in chorus effects or synths, which will alter the delay time periodically, or randomly here as well, based on the settings you make in this section. The LFO range setting, in milliseconds, determines how much the LFO will vary the delay time from the manual setting you made up top. This is the equivalent of the depth control in a typical LFO. Depending on the initial delay setting and the effect you're going for, anything from 2 or 3 milliseconds up to even around 8 or 10 milliseconds or so should be suitable for basic doubling effects. Higher settings would lend themselves to special effects. I'll get more into that next time. One of the key aspects of the original Abbey Road ADT effect was the human quality of it, the natural randomness that resulted from an engineer manually operating the varispeed control. To take the onus of live performance off the modern engineer, Waves has a random LFO pattern that emulates that quality. Very well, in fact, to make a natural-sounding doubling easier to implement without having to resort to actual manual operation. But the plugin can also be used for other effects besides doubling, like flanging and phasing, which feature more regular periodic modulation. So Waves has also included several standard LFO shapes as well for those applications. You can see you've got sine wave and reverse sine wave and triangle wave and reverse triangle wave. You can even sync the modulation to the session tempo, again, opening the plugin up to more effects-oriented applications. Whenever the LFO is set to a shape other than random, the rate control, naturally, sets the speed of the periodic modulation. Again, this is the same as you'd get with a standard chorus or synth LFO. We'll hear more examples of the various effects in the next chapter. If you're running the full stereo version of the plugin, you'll see an additional control in the lower left, Input Source Select. This lets you choose whether you want to process both sides of a stereo signal or just the left or right. In all stereo output versions of the plugin, the monitor section at the lower right lets you check stereo mono compatibility. As I mentioned earlier, with effects based on short delays, the effect can sound much more colored or peaky in mono than when the direct and delayed signal are panned apart, so you always want to make sure there'll be no rude surprises if the song is ever heard in mono, which is pretty common. The ADT 2V version of the plugin is very cool. It's common practice when doubling nowadays to have two double signals added to the original source audio. They might have slightly different delay times and would be panned to the left and right with the source in the center. This is great for adding a wide doubling effect to something like a lead vocal while still keeping the main signal firmly in the center where it should be. Now you could do this with sends and an extra instance of the plugin and an aux, but the ADT2V makes it so much easier. This is the mono in stereo out version. As you can see, you've got all the same controls as the regular mono stereo ADT, except there are two independent ADT sections. For a strong, wide ADT effect, you can set the delayed signals to both precede and follow the original for a broad spread of delay time variation. The ability to do this easily is one of the unique aspects of the Abbey Road ADT process. The delayed signals here are panned almost hard left and right, with the source in the center. Set up some subtle random vari-speed action with slightly different ranges for the two ADT signals, and you've got a nice, wide, doubled effect, but one, again, with the original signal still firmly centered in the mix.
I watch her walking down the street. I see her driving in her car, wondering who she's going to meet. I want to love her from afar.
Now, there's more. Coming up, I'll look at some applications besides doubling, Real ADT's version of other short delay-based effects like flanging and phasing.